So I've been hearing very mixed opinions on this character, right? Some people, mostly Sturby, saying, if she got buffed anymore, she would be broken, which imagine she did like yelly damage and also had this CC. Like, that would be beyond toxic, so I can see that. But the general consensus seems to be that she's really weak, not worth building, not worth drafting. And I think that's mostly just a drafting issue, right? I think there's a build and a team that she works really well in and might actually just be best in slot. So I'm going to go over that build and that team today and let you all in on the juice. So first of all, Codex and Magic. Some people run her on Sword 7, and I think that's just no bueno, right? Like, she gets 50% more damage against CC'd enemies, but then she only gets to use her S3 once, and I think you get more damage by just using it back to back. So you got to run her on this guy, right? The passives, right? Speed, ideally attack percent, and then final damage. I would have better passives, but I just can't be asked to re-roll this. Modules, it's got to be momentum, right? 36% damage increase. That's a lot. Swift Rush, because she needs to be fast. Right, fast enough at least. I think low 300 is good. I would make her faster, but this is my best momentum speed gear. And then I've just got her on like leftover Swift Rush stuff that I don't need on my speed contesters and whatnot. But you want 200 effect accuracy. I couldn't quite get it there. This attack from Swift Rate is pretty important in my opinion. Right, 2200 is quite low, but it's good enough to get the job done. Second build, Plume. Gotta be Revelation. Right, with Insight and one effect accuracy piece, I think that's just enough that she pretty consistently strips still. But she does a ton of damage in CC teams, right? Like, she'll chunk a bruiser player for like a third of their health with her S3. It's beautiful. And then the third build, it's your standard Bulwark Freya, except with crit rate, right? I run her like a DPS, right? So you need the speed still, because she needs to be able to speed contest. But if you build her with crit rate, specifically on Jackal Guard, because this thing does tons of damage, she becomes so much stronger in CC teams, right? Because, like, you would think that this turn meter push alone would make her good in CC teams, but it really doesn't, in my experience, right? It's just not enough value, right? You'd get way more from just running, a third CC character. But on a crit rate build, I think she actually does provide all the value you need. So let's get into the draft. So the draft starts with the pre-ban. Typically, I would say even if you're going second, right? I think it's actually even stronger if you're going second. You pre-ban Doki, right? Because you kind of want to bait them into first picking Raymary so that you can always have the Plume and the Aya, right? If you don't have Plume, it's much harder to make this team work. I think you almost should just draft something else if they first pick Plume, right? So if your first pick, obviously you just take the Plume. If your second pick, you want to bait them into taking Raymary, and then you get Plume and Aya, right? And then it's Bulwark Freya on 3, right? So that even if they decide to try and speed up, right, you still just speed contest with Freya. And then Nevette on 4 and Heinrich on 5. If they're picking a team that looks like it has no Bulwark whatsoever, right? So like if he didn't pick Linglo here, you can also go Nahor on this 5th slot, and that's really strong as well. But usually they'll pick at least 1 or 2 Bulwarks, and it's good to have double strip. Because if they ban your Plume and it's just 2 CC units into like triple Bulwark, you just lost the game on the draft. So let's go over what role each character plays and why they're so strong, and specifically why I think Nevette is best in slot. So first of all, Plume, right? She's about half the damage of the team, right? She's going to do tons of damage, but she's not enough on her own, right? That's why the Nevette and the crit Freya are so nice. Aya, you speed tune her just slower than your Nevette, right? And you start off with Freya S3. You give everybody the attack buff, right? You strip buffs, you ideally petrify everyone, and then you push everyone back up with Aya. You reduce your cooldown on Plume so that she takes one more turn, and then the turn after she has Revelation back up. And you S2 with Freya, and ideally, with all the pushback from Freya's passive and the push from Aya, you just lap them, right? You get to go twice before they get a single turn. And that's very strong. Then Freya is here so that even if it's, a fake turn 2 player, right? They picked Ray Mary, but then they've got, it's actually a cleave player and they try and speed up later. You still just outspeed them, right? Like they're just going to lose on the speed contest. And then also, of course, she does pretty good damage, right? Really good damage with the Jackal Guard. And she gives tons of turn meter push to your team from her buffs and tons of pushback to the enemy team with the debuffs, right? Then Nevette, of course, is your secondary damage source, right? She does less than Revelation Plume, although not much less, but, more than your crit rate Freya. And then she also has CC, right? So she lets you... She's kind of almost like a healer for the team, right? She mitigates a lot of damage because they're going to be CC'd for a few turns at the start of the fight. And so there's only going to be maybe one turn where they're actually able to move before they're, dead and gone. And then Heinrich is your counter to Amber, right? So if you pick Heinrich into a team like this where they have 2 Ambers, you can be pretty sure, and he's also like a must ban, right? You can be almost certain that they're going to ban your Heinrich and leave you with this, because if they don't, they just lose, right? So you pick Heinrich, and then from their POV, it looks like you're planning to ban the Sylph, right? Because you have Heinrich to counter the Ambers, right? What you really do is you ban one of their Amber units, right? I think Ray Mary is better to ban than Tiamat because Ray Mary can just pop off and lose you a 1 game. But, if they have more than 1 Amber, they're almost certainly going to ban Heinrich. If they don't, I think it's still fine, because each of his last words stacks counts as a separate debuff that needs to be cleansed, and then his buff block, right? So if you land all 3 stacks of last words and buff block, like this Sylph is just not cleansing anything, right? So even if they banned like the Plume here instead of Heinrich, I think it's still fine to just get rid of one of their Ambers. So, that's the role that each character has. And so basically the idea is to draft a team where there's no good ban, right? Ideally, it doesn't matter what they ban, they're still going to lose, right? So if they ban the Plume, right, you still have the strip from Heinrich, the damage from Nevette, the push, and the damage from these 2, and they lose, right? If they ban the Heinrich, you still have the buff block to counter the bloodshed stacks, and you just do way more damage, right? Because you have Plume and Nevette and your crit Freya, right? If they ban Nevette with the heal block and the buff block from Heinrich, right? Because typically you're going to be lapping them, right? You'll take 2 turns before they take their first turn. They just can't do anything, right? When they get their turn, they'll be super low health. You'll have a defense buff from Freya. They'll have heal block. They'll have buff block. They can't do anything. They're super, super low HP because Plume just does so much damage. And, they just really can't do anything to you. And then you finish them off on the next rotation when your Plume rev is back online. And then Aya, if they ban Aya, like it's so over. It's never been more over, right? Like this team without Aya is way stronger, like significantly stronger. The only reason you pick Aya is so that they can't have it, right? That's, I think, the thing that makes this team so strong is you pre-ban one and counter-pick the other of their 2 strongest counters to the team, right? And since they don't have either of these characters, Sylph is the 3rd strongest, but she pales in comparison to these 2. So the reason I think Nevette is best in slot right? Not just strong, but like the strongest, is because who else would you put here, right? If you put Nahor here, for example, and they ban your Plume, you just don't have enough damage, right? Like, even this team, if they ban Plume, you just barely have enough, right? But if you had Nahor here, like, it's even less. So I don't think Nahor works. Hizuki Mari, you already have an attack buff from Freya. Hizuki Mari actually nerfs you, right? Because it's a 30% instead of 40%. Lilith could be an alternative, but then once again, if they ban the Heinrich, you don't have buff block, and so the Tiamat will gain bloodshed stacks, and then before she goes into Amber, she will transform into the dragon and hit your whole team with that big AoE, and a lot of the time it will get you low enough, even with Freya's defense buff, that after she pops out of Amber later, if she skill ones anything, it will just die. And if it's your CC unit, like, the game gets pretty sketchy at that point. So the buff block is really nice to have. Thinking about all the different alternatives to Nevette, I think they're all just worse. There might be something better, right? But I think for the most part, they're all worse. And maybe not necessarily worse per se, but they have less redundancy and less versatility built in my opinion, right? I think with this specific setup, I think Nevette is just best in slot. So let's get into the games. Let's show off how it works. This game specifically, a lot of things went wrong, and it was still a dub. So, I think it's a pretty good team.
目覚めこそ恵みなのよ。カラスがあなたを世にへと送るでしょう。耳を澄まして、あなたたちへの贈り物だよ。違反が禁物ね。乱暴だね。一瞬で終わらせてあげる。砕かれた夢が叫んでいる。一緒に耳を傾けて。やっ私がみんなを守る。目覚めこそ恵みなのよ。プリューム・インフェルノ。油断しました。今こそ夢立ちの時よ。はっふっここでお願いください。死を依頼。避けられなかったです。
恐るるに足らず。
少しは。
So the main weaknesses of this team are Strive, right? If everybody's on Strive, you've got a lot of AoE attacks, you'll push them a lot. And they can cut ahead of your CC if she's not fast enough, right? Getting brambled a bunch by Tiamat, right? You know, if, once again, you have a lot of AoE. If Tiamat just triggers Bramble like 2 or 3 times, like it's over. And then, like this game, I lost this one because RNG, right? Nevette's base chance to petrify is pretty freaking low, so even at 200 effect accuracy, if they have, you know, an actual effect res setup, if you just miss the petrifies, you can lose just because of that, right? In this game, I missed the petrify on the Linglo. She cleansed it off of the Sylph, and then Sylph full healed the Tiamat, and at that point it was kind of over. So, you know, that's the main weaknesses of the team. Other than that, it's basically just speed, right? Like if you can get your Nevette to like 330 with the required stats, like you can bring this team into pretty much anything, right? You saw earlier, like Lilium just dies, right? Like you just do so much damage. Tank teams, even if they have cleansers, you can typically overwhelm them with debuffs. It's really just banning the Doki and taking the Aya it's just so strong. So, you know, if you have your Nevette built, I wouldn't necessarily recommend building her just for this team, but if you do already have her built, I would highly recommend trying the team out, seeing how it works for you. Hopefully it gets you some wins. And, you know, any questions, leave them in the comments, and peace out.